Start capturing sound.
Oh, we already did. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back. Another riveting episode of Two Guys in a Trailer. Steven, how you doing, bro? Cephas?
I'm doing pretty good. How are we doing? You doing whatever? You
I'm-
dropping frames or
No, we're good to
Are we
go so
playing?
far. You had to say something, which is going to immediately throw us into a tailspin, but whatever.
no? It looks good. I'm looking at it right now. It just took a minute because we're on a 49-second delay.
Yeah.
But yeah, looks good. So, did y'all survive the hurricane / tropical?
Dude, that
Depression.
wasn't nothing. I did have to pull over earlier. I had to pull over and sit in a parking lot because when I say it was coming down in sheets, it was. You couldn't see 10 feet past the front bumper of my car. It was ridiculous. So I pulled over, ate my God's chicken sandwich. Had Chick-fil-A for lunch, which was fantastic.
Which is better, in your opinion?
Okay,
The Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich.
Chick-fil-A.
That's kind of where I'm at too.
Yeah,
Mostly because it's the only one approved by Jesus.
Chick-fil-A over all other sandwiches, coming in a close second, but a completely different sandwich is the Popeyes chicken.
Is the Popeye? It's different.
Yeah, they're completely different.
Like, here's how good a Chick-fil-A sandwich is. Chick-fil-A was like, we totally don't support civil rights of like gay people and stuff. And 90% of America was like, that's fucked up. But goddamn, y'all make a good chicken sandwich. It's
Yep.
okay. Popeyes couldn't get away with that.
Well, Popeyes also did something that other restaurants don't really have the nerve to do, and that is they just sold out of their shit. They was like, all right, I mean, we're done. It's been here for 2 months. We sell out of them every day, but
Yeah, we're done.
we're done with them. We ain't bringing them back. And then
Which
brought them
seems
back
like that-
and still sold out of them.
That would be like a sign that you want to keep the thing that you're constantly selling out of,
Exactly.
right? Like, that would be like us having one of our shows gets like 50,000 views, and we're like, you know what? It's too many fucking views. We're shutting this shit down. No, you're doing good now. Keep
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, don't just try your best not to fuck this up because you're getting some traction.
Literally, all you have to do is the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on, everybody in chat? Bone, Gregory, Rex, Bob Shorkey.
Shorky's still in here. He says Popeyes. They're just you can't compare the two sandwiches.
They're different.
They're completely different. It's literally the difference between McDonald's and Five Guys.
It's literally the difference between the Matrix and the Matrix Revolutions.
Boom. And with that, let's get into the Matrix.
That seamless.
Yeah, that was a beautiful transition. So
All right.
we're doing the Matrix trilogy. What we did, just to give anybody who's watching that is not in the Facebook group, what we did was we put up a poll because there's been some discussion between Steven and myself about which was the better action movie franchise, The Matrix, 007, specifically the Daniel Craig 007s, or Mission Impossible. So we found out that out of the three, the most votes went to The Matrix. So that's what we're doing. Next week, we're going to cover
007.
007, and then the following week, we're going to cover Mission Impossible. And then we're going into uncharted territories where I think we're going to need a bigger boat. courtesy of Brittany up there screaming during the last show.
Subtle.
Yeah.
All right, Matrix, the first one, came out in 1999. It is classified as a science fiction action film directed and written by the Wachowski sisters, who were at that time the Wachowski brothers. And I'm not going to say anything else about that. Stars Keanu Reeves, Lawrence Fishburne, Carrie Ann Moss, and Hugo Weaving.
So are you saying they're not brothers anymore?
No, they're both trans women, and they are now sisters. And that's all I'm saying about it.
Okay. Whatever.
Yeah. There's nothing more to say. Has a runtime of 136 minutes. Budget of $63 million. Box office, it was made $465.3 million, which I would say makes it a success. And it also, just like Star Wars, the which one was it? Empire Strikes Back. In 2012, The Matrix was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. So, obviously, it was a critical success as well. If you look at, where's it fucking at? Cock sucker. Rotten Tomatoes, it has 87% positive reviews with an average score of 7.7 out of 10. So, critical financial success. But is it a two guys in a trailer success?
That's the huge question. Fuck the archives. You know, the Smithsonian who?
Yeah, Library of Congress, more like Library of Suck My Balls.
Yeah.
So,
this is the Library
21
of
years
awesomeness.
21 years old. Does it hold up? Is it good?
It's of legal drinking age, man. We got to see if this thing can party or not.
And I think it does.
I say it does. It definitely knows how to rock out with his cock out.
This is one of my favorite movies of all time. Like one of probably top 10 for me. Like all time. I think the story, it's just a good story, right? And as a standalone movie, it works. The issue for me is with the trilogy. So if I just judge this movie on its own, I fucking love this movie.
Which is what we're doing with the first one.
Right. We're judging each movie, you know,
as its own
obviously
piece.
The sequels, you kind of have to tie back. But this one, it gets judged on its own. And it's fucking great. Obviously, there's some outdated CGI and stuff in it. More so in the sequels than in the first one.
Definitely more in the sequels.
But yeah, it's so fucking good. It really influenced like every fucking movie from 2000 to like 2006.
Well, they did stuff with CGI at that point that was unheard of.
Yeah.
Right? Like a lot of the fight scenes, particularly the one where they go into the bank or whatever it is, they're running up the walls, or the fight scenes where he'd throw a punch and it'd stop halfway through and pan around the entire room and then finish up. Like a lot of that shit didn't get done before this movie. Right? It really brought a lot of those special effects to the forefront, which I don't know, man. I would say I don't know that The Matrix would make it into my top 10, but I don't think that I can make a sound argument to say why it shouldn't be in my top 10.
Yeah. I think the reason I'm such a huge fan of it is that not only is it a great action movie, and it's a great sci-fi movie, and it has a great story, it's also a smart movie. Like go back to the first time you saw The Matrix and you realize what's going on.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? When he takes the fucking pill and he sees that he's in the Matrix, and the Matrix is like this computer system in the real world, and fucking humans are being grown as fucking batteries essentially for these machines because AI. There's such a deep backstory there, and it's just a great fucking story, and it's smart and it makes sense.
Well, not only that, but if you go and watch it now, which is, I watched it the other day, Sunday, and if you go back and you watch it, there's a point in time in that movie where Morpheus says to Neo, sometime in the early 20th century, artificial intelligence was given life. Where are we at? We're at the early part of the 20th century, and they got motherfucking computers that are talking to each other in languages that don't exist anywhere on the planet, that nobody can read, nobody can understand. So much to the point where they had to turn the two computers off and disconnect them completely. So,
oh yeah,
it goes back to it. It foreshadows from that time into a point that we're at right now, that we're looking and going, yo, this shit could really happen.
Oh, dude, there are days where I wake up and I'm convinced it's real.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you'll wake up and it's like 3:00 in the morning and the Matrix hasn't even fully loaded yet. Like, that's how it feels sometimes. After seeing that movie, it's like, there's always the argument of, are we in a simulation? Is it all real? Like, it's interesting.
Yeah. And I dug into the simulation theory pretty deep. Like, I dug into it and started doing some homework on it. And it's like, dude, this shit's completely plausible. Like, this could happen. This could be the real legit deal.
Yeah. Well, people have argued, one of the best ones that I've heard is that since 2012, the world really did end. But that was it. Like, a simulation took over from that point on. And that's why there's all like the Mandela effect and all this shit that people experience.
And for Robert's sake, I understand we're in the 21st century. He said it was the 21st century. So, yeah.
Really, Robert? You don't have something constructive to say?
The only thing that really got me right about this movie, there was two things. Number one is that it was set in 2199, which means 200 years have gone by since this movie was current, right? 2199, and they've got, but we can't really tell.
It's just approximation.
That's just our best estimation. Well, you've got some pretty smart people in there. Your best estimation is probably pretty correct. But I don't think everything that they accomplished, as far as the intricate holes being dug into the earth and the hallways and the service tunnels and the this and the that, I just don't see that being done in 200 years time. To the scale that they show it, especially when you start thinking about where they start talking about Zion, and you really don't get a scope for Zion until further down into the movies.
I was about to say, that's more of a problem with the sequels.
Yeah.
Because as far as the first one goes, like, everything in the first one pretty much is plausible. And if it's a standalone movie, I don't have any complaints with the first one.
Yeah.
As a trilogy, the ending of the first one doesn't work. If you're talking about in a trilogy, and we talked about this a little bit before, at the end of the first movie, Neo is Jesus. He's invincible. Like, so you have two movies to go. I don't know
that Jesus was invincible, though. I mean, 3 nails took him down.
That's true. You have 2 movies to go, right, where your protagonist has already shown that he's invincible and he can destroy any of the threats posed to him. So it's like the action scenes in 2 and 3, there's no fucking tension. There's no sense of, is he going to make it out of this one? Like, you never fear for his safety at all, right? So in the first movie, when I watched it, and I'm just like, okay, this movie beginning to end works. And that's how I'm going to judge it. But I do think that the ending, in the scope of it being a trilogy, is bad.
Yeah, absolutely. They could have done much better because at the end of two, right? At the end of two, as goofy as some of the CGI fight scenes are and stuff like that, as goofy as it is, at the end of two, you like you had to know what was going to happen. They had built it up enough to where you actually wanted to see what happened at the end of that story.
Yeah.
Right? That it was like, it's a no-brainer. I've got to know what the hell's going on. So, as hokey as I think 2 and 3 are in comparison to part 1, as a trilogy, they do work together, right? There's some symbiosis between all three of them. And that brings me to my second thing that I'm not a huge fan of in part 1 is the greenwash on everything in the Matrix scenes. Like I'm pretty sure we as the people watching the movie can decipher when they put a fucking giant nail in their head and then they show up in the middle of New York City, that we're pretty apparent that's the fucking Matrix. We know that. You don't have to greenwash everything. Like the first time I watched it on my TV, I thought something was wrong.
And I think it was definitely a stylistic choice. You know, I don't think it was necessarily even that they wanted to differentiate like between the two worlds, because there's other ways that they did that by like, you know, the ports on their body and shit is in the real world and it's not in the Matrix. So there's multiple ways to tell, but I think it was just a stylized thing, just like everything in that fucking movie.
Yeah.
And you notice that in the training simulations, you don't have that issue. Right?
Yeah.
So it was literally just a stylistic choice where they were like, the computer code's fucking green on the screen. We're going to put this green wash or this green tint to the world of the Matrix.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, it doesn't bother me, but I do see where it could be. It could be a subjective thing.
It's just kind of aggravating. Like some of the scenes, like in the, for instance, when they're in the building and all the agents are coming after the three main characters, and it's like looking down that hallway, it's just like green lining on everything. Like, dude, give it up, man. Just that scene would have been so much better had it been in full color and not greenwashed.
Yeah,
so
I could see that.
It just aggravated me through the entire movie, but by the time you get done with 2, you really don't even notice it anymore. And it's much worse on part 3. So
I was about to say part 3, that ending fight scene is fucking brutal.
Oh yeah. And
like
it's
the mix of not even just the green, we'll get to it, but I mean the greenwash on top of the rain, it makes it damn near impossible to differentiate what the fuck's going on.
Yeah. It was the two coolest things about 3 in those fight scenes is they land way apart from each other and they both take off at the same time. And when they get to that punch where the big fucking ball of water just like stops. So the first time it does that, you're like, holy shit, that was badass. But the second time they do it, it takes you inside of the bubble. Whereas the first time you're just like, fuck, I wish I could have seen what it looked like in the middle of it. And then the second time they hit you with it, it's like, okay, now it's played out, but the wall goes past and it's like all quiet and almost eerie in there. That was awesome. The third part was a little bit of suspension of disbelief, like a lot bit of suspension of belief. There was a lot of shit in there. Like, I can't imagine, right, that the people from down low, from Zion, haven't figured out that they can take these things above the clouds and, you know, possibly have a tactical advantage from the sky that they don't have on the ground. Like, it seems really hard for me to believe some of the stuff like that. Like, you literally built hovercrafts and you can't just, like, I don't know, fly over them?
Well, yeah. Well, and here's the thing. So, the first Matrix was, I believe it took 5 years to
Mhm.
make. The next two movies took a combined 2 years,
Yeah.
and they both came out in the same year. And it fucking shows. But
Yeah.
before we start trashing, or at least I'm going to start trashing the next two, just a heads up.
Yeah.
But score for the first one.
Okay.
For me, Matrix, the first movie, if I judge it objective, 5.
Yep.
For
And
me.
it gets a
It's
4.5 from me.
So a 9.5. I think it's one of the best sci-fi action movies of all time, bar none.
Yeah.
It's entertaining, it's thought-provoking, it's fast-paced, it's fucking good. There are
And
obviously some CGI elements and stuff that don't necessarily stand the test of time, but that's not really a fault of the movie so much as a limitation to the technology of that time.
well, also, you were how old when this movie came out? 3?
6.
You were 6 when this came out?
No.
Okay.
It
I
was
was
probably like I probably saw it when I was about 10 or 11.
I was 17 years old when this movie came out. And I watched it in the theater. And I remember in the theater thinking, this is fucking amazing. Right?
Yeah, mind-blowing.
Yeah, because, I didn't notice the cartoon character kind of look of the CGI action because it was done so well back then and it had very rarely been used that it was, I left out of the theater going, fuck yes, that movie was badass, one of those type deals. So, I get what you're saying. I see where it, like, literally the only thing I have to bitch about this movie is that it is greenwashed and it really just irritates the shit out of me. So I'm not going to half a point for that, but
with the total understanding that's totally subjective. That it may affect you or it may not. To me, it doesn't bother me. I see it as a stylistic choice. Do I think it was the best stylistic choice? Probably not, but it doesn't detract from the movie for me.
Bob Shorkey said he was 34 when it came out.
God damn.
So he's also saying that it's been years since he's watched it. If it has been years since you've watched them, all 3 of them are on Netflix. At minimum, go rewatch The Matrix, the original Matrix, because I'm telling you, man, the movie is just, I don't know. I got those feelings of like, shit, this is fucking badass, man. I remember, I remember watching it in the theater and seeing Neo hit the ground and then bounce back up when he realized he wasn't going to make it, or the big fight scene in the hallway of the bank was like, oh my god, I gotta have more of it. So
it's a mind-blowing movie. It
absolutely
really, it stands up really fucking well for what it is.
Yeah, and there is not an adult male that did not want to drive it in Trinity in the first movie.
Yeah,
not a single male.
So with that said, with the high praise of The Matrix out of the way, let's get into the sequels. So the first one is The Matrix Reloaded, which came out in 2003. Also directed by the former Wachowski brothers. It stars the same people. Got a runtime of 138 minutes. Budget of somewhere between 127 to 150 million. Box office returns 741.8 million. So it was a financial success. If we go look at the critical responses, Rotten Tomatoes has an approval rating of 73% with an average 6.8 out of 10.
That seems, to me, a little low. But, well, okay. So, part 1 aside, because I think we both agree unanimously that The Matrix Part 1 was literally not only one of the best movies of all time, but the best movie in this trilogy. right?
Yeah, I mean it's the gold standard.
So with that being said, you have to hold Reloaded to the same standard you held the first one, and it doesn't match up. However, again,
At all.
they pushed not. I mean, no, you're right, but it pushed the envelope that it's like it. Usain Bolt, like he set himself a personal record and then broke that, and then set another personal record and broke that, all the while breaking fucking records. So they set the bar really high with part one as far as special effects during the fight scenes and stuff like that. They pushed it to the razor's edge with part two. The fight scene where there's 100 Mr. Smiths in the Smith agent in the courtyard, like that was literally the end of the envelope that they had to work with at that time.
We're gonna get stricken.
No, I doubt it. Let me go over here and make sure number 3 doesn't have the volume on it either.
But you were just saying it pushed the envelope to like the max. That fight scene takes place within the first hour of the second movie. This is a problem that happens in these movies. It's that they blow their load prematurely.
Way too soon. Well,
right.
Okay, so that what I mean by that is they took it to the maximum they had for the time, and going back watching it now when we have stuff like The Irishman where they're using 3 cameras to catch facial expressions of people that are 70 plus years old and making them look like they're in their 30s. Like, we're in a completely different lifetime technologically, so watching part 2, that cartoon or video game-esque, characterization of a person is brutally apparent. But back in, 2003, whenever this came out, it was first of its kind because it mixed video games with the 2 guys that could literally turn into holographs at any given time was absurd. And the way that they played that kind of effect was unheard of. You think about like Ghostbusters when it came out, them trying to make Slimer, and how weird it was seeing the little green guy that's actually transparent. And I don't know why in the hell we're buffering. We shouldn't be.
It's try refreshing, guys. I just typed it in chat. It started buffering for me. I refreshed it. It's working now.
Oh, okay.
It hit a lag.
Yeah.
My issue with 2 and 3, as much as the CGI doesn't hold up, which it doesn't, that's not my main issue with the movies. My main issue with 2 and 3 is that you've reached literally the height of your protagonist character development at the end of 1. There's nowhere to go for 2 and 3, so they have to invent all of these side quests and shit that really don't amount to much of anything. And then the other half of the film is spent on these long 15-minute philosophical mumbo jumbo like expositions, right? Because as we all know, when you watch a movie, you don't want to be shown something. You want to just have characters tell it to you, right? You want to have characters sitting on a park bench and telling you what the plot of the movie is. You don't want to actually see the plot. That's not entertaining. That's my issue with the movies. Like, 1 is smart. I would classify it as a smart movie, whereas 2 and 3 for me are dumb movies that are trying to pretend like they're smart and they're overcompensating.
And oddly enough, that's why I didn't have as much a problem with 2 and 3 as you do.
Yeah.
Because I really like dumb movies where the lady sits down and goes, "You're asking the wrong question. You need to ask why and not where." And then you go to the other person and he says, "Well, I don't know this, and you're a part of this system and this, and this." So you're like, okay, just by listening to the smart ass shit that's coming out of his mouth, that's a fucking asshole. He needs to die. And then later on down the movie, you realize he's an asshole, and Trinity's probably gonna fucking kill him.
Yeah.
You know, so the fight scenes in 2 were really good. The CGI, the special effects were really good. I'm not as critical of 2 as you are, because I still remember, going and watching it in the theater, and feeling like at the end of that movie I had to have more. I think they released 2 in maybe March or April of 03, and then
May.
Was it May? So May of 03, and then the other one was closer to the end of summer, right? Around October, maybe?
November.
So, yeah, you had them both released at the same time, which is kind of like we don't think about that being a huge deal right anymore, because season 4 will come out 7 months later, so we don't have to wait those typical year and a half, 2 years that you got to wait for most movies that are that heavily reliant on artificial intelligence, computers and shit. So I don't know, but that being said, watching it now, you can see a lot of the shit a lot more pronounced that you missed when you were younger, when it was fresh, when it was new, stuff like that. So I try to watch it with an objective eye for now, but it's still. And by the way, part 2 has the best fucking soundtrack of any of the movies. Like, that's one of its redeeming qualities, is like, you've got Linkin Park, you've got Marilyn Manson, you've got Rage Against the Machine, you name it, Rob Zombie, they're all on this soundtrack. It's a great soundtrack.
And I would say it has one of the best action scenes out of the whole trilogy, in that freeway scene, right? Where you have the twins that are like essentially like exiled programs, and they have the ability to move through material objects or whatever, and like kind of become almost, like you said, holograms or whatever.
Yeah.
That entire set piece, that entire scene is really fucking good, because it's not just CGI nonsense. There's some practical effects there. There's a mix of like guns, fucking martial arts, hand-to-hand, driving, like all of that shit all plays in, and it all plays in really well. So that's I think one of the highlights of the trilogy is that scene, but it's just unfortunately in a very watered down version of The Matrix.
Yeah, and one scene that I was not a huge fan of is the fact that, that everybody gathers up at Zion when they first get back, and they're having this huge party, and Morpheus gets up there and makes this long-winded statement, and then everybody starts partying, and it takes 10 minutes to show 30 seconds of Neo and Trinity fucking. Like, okay, this is great. They're having a huge party. They're over here fucking. Now we're back to the party. Why are we back to the party? Move on to the next thing. Like, they didn't stay and party. They went back and shacked up at Neo's place or whatever. Yeah. So there was, I think the problem with this is the movie it was just over 2 hours, right? 2 hours and a couple of minutes.
2 hours and 18 minutes.
Yeah. So 2 hours of this movie could have been, some of it could have been cut back. They could have easily cut a half hour of fat out of this movie, never affected the storyline, and made it a much better movie.
Because there's really no story.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of my point, is that this movie is all style, very little substance.
Mm-hmm.
Very bare minimum of substance. Like, what is the plot of the second movie? Right? It's just an in-between. That's it. Like, the first movie has a fucking plot, and the third movie sort of has a plot. And the second is just a vehicle to get from 1 to 3.
The only question that 2 answered is how, because I'll give you this much. If you watched part 1 and then you watched part 3, you wouldn't be missing, there wouldn't be very many questions as to how did we get to this point. Yeah. Right? The only question that they really answered in part 2 is how Smith got out of the Matrix.
Which they didn't really answer. They just showed it.
Yeah, they showed.
And then you're like, man, that happened.
Well, that's how he got in there.
And like, I don't know about you, but anytime it goes back to Zion, I check out. I'm not interested. I don't think it's entertaining. I don't give a shit because it's just this outside thing. Like, it doesn't. At the end, once you watch the end of the trilogy, literally nothing that happens in Zion fucking matters. None of it.
Yeah.
None of it matters. The fucking fight scenes, the robot fights, the mech suit, all that shit. By the end of it, none of it matters.
Well,
it all falls back on Neo. He's the one that fixes everything. So all of these side quests, like RPG level side quests that have made up 2 movies, they don't amount to shit. It's just something to fill fucking screen time. That's all it was.
But would it have been better if they had went in part 2, said, okay, we got to figure out how to get this to stop, right? They're tunneling into Zion. We got 30 days 30 days before they get there. How do we need to go about doing X, Y, and Z? And then made a plan, went in, talked to the whatever her name was, the
Oracle.
The Oracle, right? Went in and talked to her, had the big fight with Smith, and immediately realized we got to get to here, and here's why. Because Smith just explained that he's no longer a part of the Matrix and that he's eventually going to take over, and he's already proven that he can infect people just like he was as an agent, as a side agent, right? So we have to get to the mainframe quickly to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We get there, we stop the war, and we get rid of Smith, right? They knew Neo was the one, so why did they not just make a beeline for the mainframe?
Yeah.
So had they went in and done that and started on the journey to just bypass Zion, and Zion's just this kind of place you have to make up in your head. And
Zion just needed to be a construct. We didn't need to.
So if they had went and had some turbulence between getting there and the mainframe, and maybe met up with another ship to bring in the other characters, which, by the way, shout out Roy Jones Jr. was in this fucking movie.
Yeah.
Right. And then part 3, they show Zion. Would it have made more impact if they had just showed some of the final fight scene, some of the kind of war scene? If that had only
that you established relationships with in the second one, having to go back to Zion and be a part, and now you have stakes. Right now, there's a character that you've seen and you kind of give a shit about that's in this fucking war, and it matters.
Yeah.
Instead of just seeing a bunch of people in mech suits that you don't give a shit.
Which just proves my point that if they had cut an hour of fat or a half an hour of fat out of part 2 and then cut a half hour of fat out of part 3, they could have done either a Titanic, length 4-hour movie that would have carried itself pretty well, or they could have still broke it up into 2 3-hour movies and probably had a much better success rate with
I combine them and make it into 1 2-hour movie. That's how little plot there is between the 2 movies.
You think so?
Yep. I also think it would have been a huge improvement because here's the problem. They overcomplicated everything. Because they painted themselves into a corner with the ending of the first movie, right? Well, we've just made our protagonist invincible. Where do we go from here? You have to have some growth, right? So it turns out in the second movie that Neo isn't really the one so much as he is a byproduct, an anomaly of the Matrix, right? Why is he an anomaly of the Matrix? Because the first Matrix that they tried to do, it was too perfect and humans automatically rejected it. Why? Because humans didn't have choice in that. So they had to simulate choice, right? Or they had to give choice. Every time they give choice, it brings up this anomaly, the one. That's when at the end, he gives this the architect gives this ridiculous philosophical speech about, this is like the sixth iteration of the Matrix. You have a choice. You can go through this door and restart the Matrix, or you go through this door and save Trinity, but everyone dies, essentially, is the choice he gives them. So it comes down to choice. All of the other ones have made the choice to reset the Matrix. Neo makes the choice to go save Trinity and but all of that it's none of it's shown. I just know that because I've read about it. Like, you know what I'm saying? I've analyzed what has been said, but none of that's shown. It's all background and it's all just said. It would have been so much better for the movies, I think, and we talked about this too, if the real world as presented in the movie was a secondary Matrix, as a failsafe to those that began rejecting the Matrix that they were in, right? The machines recognized it and then interjected them into the secondary Matrix, aka the real world, and it was just another system of control, because that explains why Neo can fucking in the real world, why he can stop the machines, right, with just his mind, why in the third one he can see without eyes, all this shit that doesn't make any sense in the real world, right? But it would make sense if it was just a secondary Matrix. It also makes sense as to how Smith is able to get out of the Matrix into the real world, right? Because he did hack in from the Matrix just into another Matrix. So all of that would make sense, and you wouldn't need 3 hours of philosophical mumbo jumbo about choice, determinism, free will, none of that shit, purpose. Like, that's basically what it all boils down to, is Agent Smith is the embodiment of purpose. He has no choice. Neo is strictly choice, right? That's what they're going for. It's all symbolic, but it's overly complicated. It's dumb. You have to have everything explained to you. All they do is tell it to you. And at the end, nobody gives a shit about any of that in 2 and 3. All they care about is the fucking fight scenes.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
It. So that's what I mean. Like,
and the car chase where she's literally driving a super bike, on the freeway in the wrong direction.
Whereas the thing that made 1 so good was the story, right? The story is what made 1 so fucking good. But 2 and 3, the story takes a back seat, and then you're supposed to be impressed by all this action and shit, but the action has no tension, no stakes, nothing, because it's already been established that Neo's fucking Jesus. Not literally fucking Jesus, but he is fucking Jesus, right?
Well, there's also a lot of lines of comparison that I've seen that this entire trilogy is based off of biblical characters.
Neo is literally Jesus. He's an embodiment of Jesus, right? He saves the people by giving them a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all religious imagery. Bob Shorkey just said, since this happened 21 years ago, I wonder if they'll come out with a new movie with Neo's baby now as an adult. Actually, Matrix 4 is happening. Now, I, for one, have very low expectations of the Matrix 4. We need to kind of get going with the ratings, but we'll talk about that a little bit. Matrix Reloaded, for me, I give it a 3. Okay. I think the story is crap, and the freeway scene is that fucking good. So I give it a 3.
All right. Well, I mean, I told you before the show I was giving it a 4. So I like it because it has, dumb action scenes. It had really good fight scenes for the time. I mean, hell, it's still got pretty good fight scenes for now, right? I mean, if you look at some of the John Wick movies, there's a lot of fight scenes in there that are just as good, right? That are in Matrix 2. So for that, I give it a 4. Now, on to the fucking turd of the bunch.
Yep. Matrix Revolutions also came out in 2003. It had it stars the same people. It's directed by the same fucking people. It has a runtime of 129 minutes, budget of $110 to $150 million, box office return of $427.3 million, which is damn near half of what Matrix Reloaded made. So, and then if you look at critical responses, Rotten Tomatoes, it has an approval rating of 35% with an average rating of 5.28.
Yeah.
So clearly, objectively viewed as the worst,
the loser of the bunch.
And I agree with that assessment. I think 3 has little to no redeeming qualities to it. I think that it's just not that good. It spends too much time in Zion, right? And then when Neo, your main protagonist, for half of the movie is just sitting at a fucking train station having philosophical discussions. That's not that entertaining.
With a damn 7-year-old Indian girl.
Yeah, with a 7-year-old chick. It's like, well, this is kind of weird. And then you get to the main action set piece, right? What 3 fucking movies has been building towards. It's got to outdo everything. And instead, it's a one-on-one fight scene between Neo and a character we've already seen him fight 150 of.
Yeah. And win.
in the beginning of the second movie.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and he won that fight, by the way.
And he won that fight. Like, what, like, there's nothing about the third movie to me that has, like, it's not even entertaining. Like, I don't even find it to be an entertaining movie. I remember the first time I watched it and I saw the final fight scene, I was like, that's badass. This is so cool. And then looking back, it's like, it just doesn't hold up at all. I don't like it at all.
Well,
I do not like the third movie at all. I think it's trash.
Yeah, I get that. But you also see, to me, this one's more of a, it's kind of like a mix between Good Will Hunting and Transformers. Right? There's a lot of conversation that's had, and then there's a lot of ridiculous robot fights. Right? Yeah. Which I'm all for ridiculous robot fights. Like, I think the part that was the most fun for me was the scene where they're losing the dock, you know, and there's these guys out there with these big fucking machines just busting off shots at these goddamn who knows what's the Sentinel things, right? Like, that was a fun scene for me. I know it made no difference to the storyline whatsoever.
That was my point I was about to make.
Yeah, but it was awesome. You know, nevertheless, if you took that scene by itself and said, this is a new movie coming out, what do you think about it? I would be in. I'm like, yeah, I'm down with that. These guys are driving fucking robots that shoot grenade rounds. I'm down with that. It
would have been better as just a trailer. This
absolutely,
movie has been better as a trailer. Like,
absolutely. I just showed that. You'll have to go back and watch it because
I was literally watching it and I was like, yep, that's everything good in the movie.
Yep, exactly.
Like, that's it.
So much more room to add in some little things that I look for in a movie. Right? Is Neo dead? Did he actually die, or did that little fucking cart carry him back to Zion where everybody praised him as the Messiah? You know, what played out the short time after his death? How long was their peace for? We don't know. Obviously 21 fucking years, because they're fixing to come out with another one. So it lasted as long as it could last, to quote the Oracle.
Which is just definitely meant to be vague, not just terrible writing. There's so much bad writing in these sequels. It's unbelievable.
Dude, Spencer was sitting here watching the first one with me, and Morpheus said something. I'd look back at him and go, we found the one. And he's like, stop doing that. Because, like, he has these little, it's almost like a catchphrase at the end of every statement. You know?
Yeah, and if you notice, like, they try to really hammer home the point that's, like, basically the embodiment, like I said, of, like, predeterministic views. Like, he's just purpose driven. He doesn't have a choice. He's there to accomplish a goal.
Yeah.
And go is choice. Right? And so in the dialogue, they literally say the words choice and purpose so many fucking times. And they interject them into sentences.
Yeah.
Who does that? Who says that about, like, getting in a car? Let us jog with resolve and purpose. Like, get fucked. So I
Nobody
don't know.
talks like
I don't like this movie. I'd give it a 2.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's trash. I think there's absolutely no reason to watch it unless you just have to know how it ends. And I would say at that point, just fucking Google it. Like,
or you could watch and then fast forward to the last 15 minutes because you got to make up the 5 minutes for credits.
Yep.
Right? Move forward to the last 15 minutes, and I think you'd get a pretty good idea. Spoiler alert for anybody who hadn't seen a 21-year-old movie, but the way he loses his sight is a loose electrical connection to the eye that arcs across his eye. So that's how he loses his sight. So now if you skip to the 15-minute mark and they don't explain that, that's how it happened.
Yep. And the reason he started seeing code in gold without eyes is because
he's the one.
Yeah, there's no explanation.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can actually watch the entire 3 hours and there's no explanation.
Yeah,
you just
none.
Just is.
So you're giving it a 2. I told you from jump earlier that I was progressively going down. This one gets a 3.5 for me just because it does have some action points in it. There's a couple of good fights. The fight scene in the what do you call it? The hovercraft, right? Where they bust through the fucking door. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and they bust through the fucking door and blow the EMP, and everything stops for a minute. And there's the scene leading up to it where they're shooting the big machine guns and stuff. Like, I thought that was pretty decent. It was literally the only redeeming quality, but it was also done very well for its time. So I give it a 3.5. So 5.5.
It's pretty low.
That's pretty low.
I think objectively. Well, I think we should save the discussion of what action series is the best after we review the other two franchises.
Yeah.
But I think clearly based on those accumulative scores, you can tell that might not be in the top spot.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add up all of these scores, divide it by 3, and that means it gets a 7.33 overall as a trilogy. Right? So I'm going to put that in here. 7.3, not 73. 73.33. Right? So as a total, the entire thing, which obviously part 1 is carrying the vast majority of the load on that one.
Yep.
But it gets a total rating of 7.3. So we'll go by that based on the next 2 action series we're going to do. Next week we're going to do James Bond, specifically the Daniel Craig versions. Steven will get a post up on Facebook letting you know which 3 we're going to watch. I highly recommend you go watch all 3 of them and then join the conversation next Monday night. So we will be here. We're going to get out of here. Love, peace, and movie grease.
Later, guys.